What's up, guys? Warren Ness here, rock sculptor. Hope all is well. We're live from the studio, cooking things up. Today we're going to be talking about the scratch coat and had some tips and tricks to how to apply, and we're going to also talk about the measuring out the contents. All right, so let's just jump right in. We're going to be applying a scratch coat to this XPS foam. The foam has been roughed up. You can wire brush that. You can use a notch trowel, sandpaper, rasp, any device that suits you. The idea is to rough it up and put horizontal grooves in it so the scratch coat mud will adhere to it. Now, you're going to want to apply this mud around 3/8 to a ½ inch thick. A lot of times on the corners, I'm going to go a little thicker. Those points are the areas that catch the most abuse, whether you're transporting this or you're laying it on its side. So I think it's just good measure to, go a little extra thick on the corner. Okay, guys, so the easiest way to put this on is I usually start with a handful, and I'm referring to as the hand application. You could spray this on, but for the sake of time and masking things off, we're going to go ahead and hand apply. So first thing I do is I grab about a handful's worth, and I start at the bottom, and I just squeegee up, just like that, fading to zero. Okay, I'll do it again. Start over that, and I'll squeeze you to zero. What you don't want to do, what I mostly commonly see with newbies coming in and applying this is this. This is what I see. They'll put it on, and then they would start playing with it a little too much. Maybe they see it maybe falling off a little bit, and then they're trying to pack it in. Best thing to do is to keep that hand motion moving northward, or northbound, excuse me, and, fading to zero. Super important. Okay, now the mix design is the same as a carved mix, but with two exceptions. First exception, you're adding AR glass fiber, and we're going to go ahead and put that in the description below. The second thing is the carves dosage. Dosage is going to be at 6%. So unlike the carved coat, that's 12%, you're going to want to be at 6%. So super handy there. And you can see I'm just kind of working it in. Now that I got a little layer on there, I can go a little fatter. And again, I'm using my hand because it's quicker. Just like so. See that? I'm going to rotate this a little bit, something like that. And I'm not going to do the whole thing because it's pretty self-explanatory, but you can see that motion, my hand is moving through. If you were to stop midway, what happens is you're pulling it off. The mud on the glove, and when it touches the mud, there's a bit of a suction that goes on right there. Super important. Now, if you notice the bottom kind of flares out, a little bit of like an elf foot, you're going to want to kind of square that off. So I usually just screed it like that. Hold my hand flat, and then go up. The other thing, too, is I want to point out is using trowels. I don't use the steel trowel when I'm putting this on. What happens is, and I'm going to do it for the sake of demonstration, is you slick it out. You can slick it out. When you slick it out, you got to go back in with a scarifier, which is totally acceptable. To each his own on how you want to apply it and what are the devices you want to use to kind of prepare for the carve coat. If you're going to do that, you can run this in a horizontal manner, and this is ready to take the carve coat. My process is when I'm hand bombing or hand applying, since I'm here anyway, I end up just running my fingers through it. I'm at that point, and I want to describe to you why, is if I steel trowel this and then gauge rake it or scarify it, there's still areas of this hard coat that are slick. The only areas that are kind of rough is the areas that's in the recess from the scarifier, okay? And so that's a big deal to me because I want 100% roughness. I'm going to get that capillary action that happens when the carve coat hits the hard coat, and you get better suction I put a lot of carved mix on my substrates to get more shape and geometry depending on what I'm building. So that's a big dividend for me. So I'm just going to rake this. And the other thing too is what you're looking for is you don't want to create a whole bunch of these nodules. And they can be knocked off later, but these act like bond breakers, right? I'm going to rotate this, finish this up. And this is going to be a bluestone kind of granite planer. Just like so. And again, I'm only going to do one face for the sake of the demo. Now I'm just going to rough that up. And, you know, that's basically it. We're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the other 3 sides. Stay tuned. Okay, as you can see, we got the mud laid up. It goes pretty quick when you're in the process. You know, you're putting it on, you're squeegeeing it, and then you're backstroking it, kind of getting it flat, getting out some of these burrs as you're working through it. If you notice my hand movements, I'm always following through. I'm never going downward, I'm always going upward. And as you feather that material out, you can go to, you're almost squeegeeing it to 0. And again, if you wanted to make this thicker, let's just say this was a very aggressive boulder or something like that. After you get your mud up, you know, you can come back and literally, you know, pre-shape in some geometry. So if you have a flat face foam like this, you could do a pre-build in this mode. It grips into the foam pretty good. With the fibers and the carves, the rheology of the mix is pretty fat. So just something to note there. If you do something like that, just make sure you soften your edges out. So if you notice, like if this bump out, what you don't want is something just protruding out like that. Because then as the carve coat comes over the top, you could get air in there, which becomes frustrating when you're shaping the mud. You can get entrapped air, which wants the mix want to fall off. Secondly, if there's an air pocket behind there that you can't see, that could hold water, and for you guys up in the freeze and thaw environment, it's going to create a problem. So I'm going to feather that out. I always think about it like a blanket. If you have like a pre-shape, almost how like a quilt goes over pillows, it softens that. If you put a pillow in the middle of a bed and then throw a quilt over the top, it kind of softens that plateau. And I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to add a couple of more little bump outs, little doodads, and then just because I kind of have the mud, and this one is going to be of a piece of granite. I'll put another one right here. Something like that. Take another plop. I'll probably just go right on top of that, just something like that. Again, feather that out a little bit. Pre-shape that. So it's kind of a cool little thing to do when you have a flat piece of foam that you are looking for some extruded geometry. And I'm going to carry this right on up. See, I'm fading that to 0, keeping everything kind of elongated. All right. Now, if I was doing this, let's just say this piece was going to get shipped off, I would probably put this in the foam. I would laminate foam. Foam is lighter than mud, but for something that's going to go in the back of the pickup and just transport it maybe 10 miles away, totally fine, especially for this piece. So, all right, guys, well, we're going to scratch this. I'm going to let it dry, and then we'll show you what this looks like hardened. Stay tuned. Okay, guys, to recap that mix design, we ended up with 7 quarts of Portland cement, 11 quarts of washed fine sand, 4 quarts of water. That's going to vary depending on your moisture content of your sand at the time of mixing. We ended up with 0.7 quarts of carbs. And then lastly, we ended up with 1 quart of AR glass fiber, 12 millimeter. Again, all the descriptions will be in the link below. And then lastly, we're also going to share the math on how we arrived at these numbers. This batch is for a 5-gallon bucket. You may have a larger batch, you may have a smaller batch. So we'll share that in the bottom. Okay, I want to touch on the mix sequence. Super important, and I find it to be super helpful to when you're adding your dry goods to your liquid. I usually start with a 5-gallon bucket with just the water, and then I add my dry goods to the water. Starting with the sand. The sand should be the first dry good particle to hit the water. That's going to eliminate any clumping that may occur if it were Portland cement being added to the water. And so, super helpful hint. So just be mindful of the mix sequence. So to do the play-by-play, we end up with the sand, the Portland, we add the carbs next, and then lastly the fiber. Now the fiber is dosed at anywhere from 1% to 3% of dry good weight. Just a note on that. Okay guys, it's been about 12 hours or so. We let this thing cook overnight. As you can see, it's nice and hard. Couple of quick notes. I did not brush this down like I usually do. I wanted to show you what these nodules look like when they're hardened. And it's super important to make sure that these nodules are kind of knocked off, or not have so many of them. This happens when you're scarifying the surface and material builds up. Now when we apply the carve coat on the next video, you're going to see when I lay the mud up, I'm going to leave a few to show you what these things, how they can be problematic. But for now, we're going to buzz them off. They're loosely attached. As you can see, you can knock them off. Just like that. I'm going to rotate this just a little bit. And I'll do a little bit right here. And just like that. So, like I said, those turn into bond breakers, and it makes more sense when I'll be applying the carve coat to this. Okay guys, so we're wrapped up. I just want to share the amount of mud used on this flower pot. We ended up with using that whole bucket. That whole bucket worked out perfectly. And just to note, the dimensions on this piece, 24 inches wide, approximately, and then 24 inches high. Now the length is 28 inches by 24 inches high. That kind of gives you a sense of volume and how much material was needed to cover this flower pot. That may help you in estimating your hard coat cost and quantities. All right guys, catch you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you.